Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, we are reviewing what many people are calling the absolute best spec'd Epiphone ever. Now, whether that's true or not, I guess we'll find out today, because there's also been some people saying that the QC on theirs hasn't been very good. But the guitar that we're talking about today is the Epiphone Alex Lifeson Axcess Standard. So, Alex Lifeson is part of the band Rush. You've probably heard of them. It's one of those bands you either absolutely love them or you're not a big fan of them. But it doesn't matter what group you belong to, YYZ hits hard. So let's go ahead and check out his newest signature guitar from the Epiphone lineup, because this is actually an Epiphone version of a guitar that he did a while back ago with Gibson. That was in 2011. It looked like this. Alex Lifeson is known for the Les Paul accesses, and what that means is the back of the guitar is extra sculpted to allow access up to the higher fret registers, similar to what Neil Schon likes on his Les Pauls. But other than the Viceroy Brown Gibson, there's also been a red version as well as an ebony finish, but he's also had an ESLP custom in a white finish, as well as his EDS 1275 in white that he's well known for, and he even had a signature 355 in white. Alex Lifeson is no stranger to signature guitars, so let's go ahead and check out the Epiphone version. First off, it comes with one of their Epi-Lite cases. It's like a mix between a gig bag and a hard shell case. They're not too bad. I think you can buy these separately for about $90 if you're just looking for something inexpensive to have your guitar in. But inside here, all right. The thing I didn't tell you about Les Paul accesses is most of them have a Floyd Rose type system on them as well. All right. Actually, pretty chunky on first impressions here, but that top is very active for a veneer. Like, I'm at the point, is that really a veneer? I mean, generally, veneers do have some movement. It depends on what type of a grade of guitar you have. Sometimes it's just like a photo flame where they put a photo of flame figuring and then it doesn't move. But a real wood veneer should move like this one does. So that means it's a quality product from that aspect. And it's nice and glossy. Like, I was almost expecting to find like a satin finish on here. And this Viceroy Brown finish, yeah, I kind of dig it. It reminds me of like a iced tea color, even though, it's not necessarily iced tea. It's a little bit darker on the edges. But it's definitely completely transparent, even though it kind of looks dark in certain photos and angles. But we've got that new Epiphone headstock style. You almost have like a little bit of a tint to the lacquer on that. Not a lot, but just a little bit. And it looks like this trem system is branded Graphtec. And that's because this thing's actually hiding a little bit more than what you just might see right off the bat. Not only do you get this extra heel carve back here, but it also has a built-in piezo system. So you're going to be able to get some acoustic-like tones out of this as well. That's what all these extra battery cavities are back here. But man, this neck is made out of so many pieces. So they've got a scarf joint on the headstock, which you don't normally see that on Epiphones. Not like that anyways. That's interesting. Okay. And then we've got another one down here, and then they sculpt that away into what they call the Les Paul Axcess heel carve. It's not the same as his Gibson version. It looks like it's a little bit better than the Les Paul Modern, but just by a little bit because they've kind of sculpted this down a little bit more. That was always my one complaint about the Les Paul Moderns. You can check out this review and demo if you want, is they still had that pointy edge. So at least that's a little bit better in that aspect. Straight out of the box. Seems to have held tune pretty well. The action's really low, so I'm happy with it for that. But it looks like we've also got fancy electronics in here, so we will have a lot to talk about today. But so far, I would say I'm pretty impressed with this. It feels nice. It's got a good weight to it. The only thing that throws me off is the multiple piece neck. But let's talk a little bit as to why people are calling this one of the best Epiphones ever released. Okay, so these guys right here on their website, brand new, they are $899 retail price. Currently, as of the time of making this video, they're selling used between $1,100 to $1,499, but that's simply because only the first batches came out at this point in time. If you're patient and willing to wait until the end of the year, they are going to be bringing another batch in. I don't know if that's going to be the last one or if they're going to continue making these for years, but as of right now, only the first batches came in, and that's why people are paying more than retail to get their hands on this great Epiphone. So for my comparison today, I'm going to use retail price, $8.99. This is most like the Les Paul Modern figured guitar because obviously we have a figured top here. It's basically one of those with a more vintage style finish. It doesn't have the fade. It looks like a vintage guitar, well, except for all this other stuff, but but those guys are $699, a $50 premium over the regular Les Paul Modern. So if we take that $699, add the Epilight case, that's about $90. Add some sort of a Floyd Rose system. Again, this one's a Graphtec branded, but probably around $100 to buy one of those separately. And then get your piezo pickup in there, that's about another $100. And just right there, before you even put any type of a premium onto Alex Lifeson's name on this guitar, you're already well above the point where you're getting a great value for your money, compared to what's already being offered by Epiphone. But besides the Axcess cut being just a little bit better on these, you also have this belly carve that's different from the Les Paul Moderns. So, I mean, in many ways, on paper, this thing seems absolutely fantastic. But let's go ahead and throw this guitar on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs and then plug it in for a tone sample so we can make a judgment for ourselves. Inside the new Alex Lifeson model, man, this guitar is just a mess of wires, but let's go ahead and try to make some sense out of this. So we do have Epiphone USA pickups in here. What that just means is they were designed in the USA. They're just the standard Epiphone pickups. That's pretty much the only thing they didn't upgrade to the max on this thing. So the neck pickup is actually ceramic. It's the Epiphone Ceramic Pro pickup. So I'd imagine that'd actually be pretty hot. Whereas the bridge pickup is a little bit more traditional. They call this one the Pro Bucker 3. So I think we've had those in a few different Epiphones before, so that should be fairly familiar sounding. But we'll take a quick look inside our pickup cavities here. You got some sort of markings in here. You can see it's a short neck tenon, and then this one just has the QR code for the Alex Lifeson model in here. It's kind of funny how they have to do the grounding wire for the trem straight through that though. And then we actually have routing on top of the body in order to accommodate the tremolo system here. So you can actually see the mahogany body, not only just on the back, but through here and in the pickup cavities. But now that I'm looking in here, the maple cap actually goes all the way down further until you get to the mahogany body right here. So what you're seeing in here, despite looking dark, is still the maple top. It's just the color that they've stained the inside. I wonder if they purposefully did that just to make it not stand out as much. But in order for Epiphone to save money, generally this is just a plain maple top, and then they put a fancy flame maple veneer on top of that. So it's still a maple top, it's just this is not a solid flamed top. They just did that for the cosmetics of the top. That's a really good example of showing you the maple that's underneath it, very plain. Before we continue on here, something that kind of annoys me about this guitar is even when this is completely secure, there's still a gap, so it's not like fully formed to the top. That's something I noticed while playing this, and it kind of bugged me a bit. I'd love to tell you what the pickups measure, but there's so much fancy electronics in here that it really doesn't help. I mean, you can turn the volume on and off. It just gives a constant reading depending on which jack you're in. The other one was like 10.10, so I can't give you guys that information this time. But speaking of a mess of wires, let's go ahead and figure out this piezo system. So here's the trem itself. It's very similar to a Floyd Rose. The way you set the intonation as well as tune it from the fine tuners is a labeled Graphtec. This is called the Ghost Bridge system. So you see these black saddles right here? Those are actually what they use to create the piezo system. So they're actually pickups. And if you flip this around to the other side, you can see an individual wire coming from each of them. And then that goes into the system that we'll talk about onto the back. So all these wires, they are going to the saddles in order to create that extra pickup here. And this is a pretty chunky brass block on the back. I thought it looked a little bit wimpy looking, but it actually has some pretty good weight to it. I'd guess just the block itself is probably around, 10 ounces or so? But anyways, to control that, this is not a regular Les Paul setup. It's not volume, volume, tone, tone. So this is bridge volume like it always is. This is neck volume like it always is. But this is the volume to the piezo system. So what's unique about this guitar is you can actually blend the piezo with your other pickups here. So in order to do that, you just turn this on. That's full blast, 7, 5, 4, all the way down to 0. So you don't have to have it all the way on. It's not like an on-off switch. It's more of like a blending system. And all that piezo does is it kind of adds a slightly acoustic element to your sound. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute when we demo it. And then this is a master tone system. And on top of all that, you actually have coil splits for each pickup. But this one is actually an on-off switch, so if you don't want it on at all, just pull it up. And then over here on the side, you actually have 2 output jacks. I believe this is the direct out to your piezo bridge. So if you wanted to send that to an acoustic amp, whereas you send the rest of that to an electric guitar amp, you could do that. But they just have 2 output jacks on the side right there. But moving on from our maple top and mahogany body, we have a mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard. We've got the 22 medium jumbo frets with what they call the Lifeson neck profile on this. We'll get the dimensions on that here in a minute. We'll just kind of take a look at this for a second. The frets feel absolutely fantastic on here. Now, if you ever see a guy commenting that I hate Epiphones, I don't know where that guy got that from. The only thing I don't like about lots of Epiphones are the frets are kind of scratchy. When you do bends and whatnot, you can really hear it. But this guitar, I don't know if it's a spec or if I just happen to get a magical example. I'm really hoping it's a spec. It doesn't do that. These feel just as good, if not better, than some Gibson frets. I'll show you that when we do the playing demo. I'll do a scratching test for you. But in that aspect, I was very impressed with this guitar. So we've got the acrylic trapezoid inlays. It's a 12-inch radius, pretty much everything you're used to here. And if you're wondering what's going on here, it's because I took the locking nut off so you could kind of see it. It just secures into place with 2 screws on the back. And then from there, you just use these little clamps that you adjust with Allen keys to lock your strings down. And then once you've got your tuning set up here, then you do all your fine tuning with your tailpiece here. As far as neck specs, actually starts off pretty skinny, 1.68 inches. But then 2.11 by the 12th, it gets really wide. Then the Lifeson custom profile starts out at 0.83 for at the first fret neck depth. Then up towards the 12th, it's 0.94. So skinny, but gets a little bit fatter, but just mainly feels like a skinny neck. Here it is at the first fret neck depth and at the 12th. As far as the face of the headstock, it's just the new Kalamazoo style Epiphone. It says Les Paul model on there, and there's really not much that says Lifeson on this guitar, except for the cut-off truss rod cover that, honestly, you can't even read what that says if you didn't know whose signature guitar this was. But you can see the neck wood right there, as well as the truss rod hiding in there if you want to adjust your neck. And cool Kluson tuners that we'll take a look at on the back as well. Now moving on to the back, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can talk about. So first let's start with the trem block. So here it is all back installed. You can see the wires just kind of come through this area. It seems like they could get caught in the trem springs, so I don't know about that. It's also possible I might have put it back in wrong. I think initially they were on top, but at the same time I could still see it getting caught regardless. But stock from the factory, there's 3 springs, just a regular claw. But then those wires from the saddles then end up here, and then one of these wires then goes into here, which is the rest of the piezo PCB system. And this is what that cavity looks like. It looks like there's a very slightly sticky pad that they intended it to stay in place, but even when I had first opened it, it was already like sitting halfway up. So I think the only reason they do that is so you don't hear it knock, knock, knocking when you shake the guitar. But then from there, this is powered by a battery, and this is one of my favorite battery compartments I've ever seen. If you've ever had like a mid-2010s Gibson that has that built into the back plate, you know how annoying those things are to work. This one, you simply, just like that. You don't have to get screwdrivers and mess your fingers up to open these darn things. It's just simply pull it and it opens. Fantastic. And they have a little blue ribbon that helps you get the battery out. And that's just secured to the guitar with 4 screws on the outside. And that's what that route looks like. So a couple of wires go into there to power that. So from there to there to there to here, you got to get all this stuff out of the way, and then you can kind of start to make sense out of it. So you've got 3 push-pull pots in here. They seem to be of decent quality, and then just one regular one right here. This one's made in Korea, so these might be Korean pots as well, so maybe not CTS. But I'm not an expert in looking at those, so they might be CTS, I'm not sure. But you've got so many wires in here, you might be like, what is going on? Most of this is just quick connect systems and that. So what's nice is if you wanted to upgrade your pickups to Gibsons or Seymour Duncans or whatever, you can actually do that very simply. You just have to
take your pickup wire here and then solder your new ones on there. You don't have to worry about messing with all this other stuff as long as you don't want to change the pots. So I would say it's a relatively user-friendly guitar to mod if you wanted higher end pickups in here. But if you wanted to upgrade your pots to something else, yeah, that'll be tricky. I would just leave it alone. But this double output jack, it's interesting how they did this. I figured they just would have routed this entire thing out, but no, they just put 2 of them in there. And that's what that route looks like within the body. I would not want to be the guy that has to wire all this stuff up. And then our toggle switch, nothing fancy up here. But here we can see our belly cut, which is exclusive to this model at this time. I mean, there's other models that have it, but that's what makes this better, in my opinion, as compared to a Les Paul Modern. But then we have a strap button on the bottom, one on the top, and again, we can see our Axcess heel carve right here. Nice and smooth in this area. I mean, if you take a look between this and the Les Paul Modern from my other review, you can definitely see the slight differences between the two. This one, in my opinion, is much more functional. But there is binding along the top, just in case you didn't see that on the front, but not on the back because this is a standard. So now onto the neck. As I was telling you guys earlier, it's made of multiple pieces. You've got a scarf join here. And then up here, it almost looks like this was inlaid. I don't think I've seen that before. Like, you see what I'm talking about? Normally scarf joints for the neck, they look like right here, but this was just one piece there, then a little bit more grafted on here, probably for added strength when they were doing that. And then whatever was going on here. But the serial number on this one makes it a 2021 model, and you have Epiphone branded Kluson style tuners. They actually look and function pretty well. But then again, this is a locking trem system, so you just have to get it good enough, and then these things are pretty much out of the equation anyways. All said and done, this thing weighs 9 pounds, 5.3 ounces with the trem bar on. A lot of the weight from this one comes from the body, so it actually feels quite heavier than it actually is. But let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Okay, let's go ahead and run through the tones of this. But before that, I just want to elaborate a little bit more on the frets that I was talking about on the workbench. I mean, you can even see just how shiny these things are. And I did not do any polishing to this at all. Normally on Epiphones, my biggest complaint about them is, I love everything else, but the frets always feel scratchy. This one, they spend extra time on them. Listen to this. There's none of that scratchiness that you normally find. A lot of that, what you're hearing is just my finger dragging on the fretboard. So just the feel of this guitar is instantly better than any Epiphone that I've had previous to this date. It's like one of those Les Paul Moderns, except for even better in that aspect. I'm not a big Floyd Rose guy, or any type of trem system, so if you're looking for a review on that aspect of this, I'm sorry, that's not what this one's for. I'm not even gonna touch it. I'm just happy if it's in tune. But let's go ahead and go through all the tones, starting with our neck pickup here. Then you can also split that. So it's just your normal coil split there. You get a fuller sound versus kind of more single coil. Okay, let's explore our bridge position now. All right, now let's try our middle position. it's just the bridge split. Now just the neck split. Both of them split. Alright, so those are your basic clean tones, but don't forget you also have the piezo that you can mix into this. So that's controlled by this one, just to refresh your mind. So here we are with that on 10. We'll switch over to the bridge position and just kind of show you a brief rundown between that. So this is the bridge with the piezo full on 10. If that's too much, you can roll it down to like 7. Or all the way off. But then you can also just completely turn off your magnetic pickups and just have the piezo. Doesn't sound half bad for your piezo, but generally these things will sound better when you run them through an acoustic amp. So you can actually have the piezo come out of this output if you want to be able to blend the sounds on stage. I don't have an acoustic amp, so I can't demo that portion of it, but that's what that other jack is for. Now let's try that blended in with the neck position. Almost has like a slightly out of phase sound to it. Kind of funky. Comparison, regular neck. Add your piezo. And now, of course, our middle position as well. Versus how it regularly sounds. And of course you can also coil split that as well while having the piezo on. So as you can tell, very versatile guitar. You kind of got to tinker and dial in whatever you want. You don't have to have it full on piezo. Again, you can turn that down just to have a little bit if you want some more brightness to your tone. But it's like mixing an electric guitar with an acoustic guitar in a roundabout way. So now let's go ahead and try some distortion with this.
Now that we know all about the new Alex Lifeson signature Epiphone Les Paul Axcess, what are my final thoughts on this thing? The best part about all of this, besides it just being a very good value for your money as compared to the other Epiphone offerings, really comes down to the frets. Epiphone, whatever you did to these frets, do it for every single guitar, and man, Epiphone would truly have their game stepped up to the point where I could see people buying Epiphones instead of Gibsons. This one feels so right. Now, I'm not a big fan of this neck profile. It's just a little bit thinner than I would prefer, and I was having a lot of issues of this top E string just falling off the fretboard while I was trying to do pull-offs during chords and whatnot. So I don't know if this needs to be slightly adjusted for my own personal tastes. It doesn't look like it's overly off the center. It's just something I noticed while playing this one. So that might be something, if you do a lot of stuff like that, you might have to adjust your playing style. But if this thing would have came with Gibson USA pickups, it just would have been a crazy value. But you're at that point where if you make an Epiphone guitar $1,000, I'm sure a lot of people would be like, $1,000? Should I really buy that? Are Epiphones supposed to be that expensive? Honestly, I think we'll see that within the next year or so because they keep packing so much value into these. That's about the only thing I would change is the pickups. I mean, they weren't terrible. They sounded good. It's nothing you'll have to take out of the guitar right away, but I think down the road you might want to upgrade those. But this thing certainly has the look for $899. It's got the feel, it's got the playability. I thought the comfort card was very nice. And this is definitely much better than the Epiphone Modern's cutaway heel because of mentions that we've already talked about. I really did enjoy this guitar. Sure, there's a few cosmetic things that I might have changed that we talked about on the workbench, but overall, I would say this is a solid buy, and it makes sense that people are paying more than retail to not have to wait for one of these. Hopefully, the guitar market won't be quite as crazy here in a couple of years, but I always report what the current market values are, and hey, this one even gets a little bit of figuring on the back. Shame that you can't tell it with all these back plates, though. So yeah, if you could pre-order one of these at retail price, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. It's a really good guitar. I just wish they would have made these in non-trem varieties because this is a fantastic guitar. I just don't get along with trems. That's just me, though. Don't let it scare you away from them. Get it properly set up, learn how to use them. I'm sure they're just fine. It's just, I don't have much of a use for them. All right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed checking out this Alex Lifeson signature guitar with me today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. As always, if you're interested in being the next owner of one of these demo guitars, you can check them out on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. There's some links in the description.